We know that in most cases, talent alone won't cut it. Luck is usually part of the equation, and no body of work showcases this notion better than Harrison Ford's. For decades, he has been seen as one of the ultimate natural movie stars, which is funny because there was nothing especially inevitable about the way he got there. I mean, had Al Pacino not passed on a role in a movie he claimed he didn't understand, Ford would never have become the black-vested maverick who did the Castle Run in under 12 parsecs. If Tom Selleck had not been bound by his contract on Magnum PI, the actor would never have picked up the whip and donned the fedora that made him a permanent fixture of popular culture. And supposing Alec Baldwin's contract negotiations had not gone sideways, Ford would have never brought his particular gravitas to Tom Clancy's most effective CIA operative. But before luck or fate played their roles, the actor was already grinding away through the 1970s, turning up in small roles for directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Michelangelo Antonioni, and George Lucas, whilst working as a carpenter to make ends meet. So when his career exploded between 1977 and 1984, the real surprise wasn't just that Harrison Ford became a star. It was what came next. Yes, Star Wars and Indiana Jones made him an integral part of the blockbuster architecture. But Blade Runner, with its cyberpunk-infused theme, was far more experimental than his image allowed. And then came Witness, that earned the actor his sole Academy Award nomination, proving dramatic authority beyond adventure. Those years cemented A-list status. What followed is where the career opens up. Over the next decade, Ford spent that hard-won stardom exploring. Not always cleanly, not always successfully, but with far more curiosity than his better-known roles suggest. Some hits, some misses, and even some buried beneath the star he became. Together, they reveal an actor far more varied and elusive than the myth. As we know, long careers, especially ones anchored on pop culture staple roles like Ford's, always create blind spots. So, to give them the attention they deserve, here are my top 5 picks for Harrison Ford's most underrated movies listed in chronological order. But before we get started, here are a few honorable mentions. 1995 Sabrina. A remake that was never gonna win over purists, but a much better film than its reputation suggests. Sidney Pollack gives it a glossy, old-fashioned elegance, and Ford is very good at playing a man so emotionally constipated he practically treats charm like an accounting error. 1997's The Devil's Own. This one is best remembered for the troubled production, which is a shame because actually the film itself is a tense, bruised thriller with real moral weight. Ford brings a grounded decency to it, and that steadiness plays nicely against Brad Pitt's volatility. 2000's What Lies Beneath. This is one of the stranger films in Ford's career, and all the better for it. A sleek, Hitchcockian-like studio chiller that lets him lean into a more ambiguous register than usual, reminding you that he was often at his best when he stopped giving audiences exactly what they expected. And yes, finally one to avoid, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. A tired, weightless sequel so misconceived that it makes Kingdom of the Crystal Skull look like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Definitely one to avoid. And now moving on to the ranking. At number 5 is The Mosquito Coast. The second collaboration between Ford and Australian director Peter Weir found the duo working on the adaptation of Paul Theroux's novel, which follows Ali Fox, an eccentric inventor who uproots his family from Massachusetts and hauls them to Central America to build his own version of a better world. He talks endlessly about American waste, modern stupidity, and the corruptions of comfort, convinced that somewhere deep in the jungle, he can engineer a purer, smarter, more self-sufficient life. The problem, of course, is that Ali is not just a dreamer, he's a zealot, a control freak, and the sort of man whose certainty gets more dangerous the longer you listen to it. This was certainly not the kind of message that sat well with critics and audiences during the sunny, optimistic 1980s. Moviegoers were not getting the usual Ford package here. They were getting a slow-burning prestige adventure about blind idealism, paternal arrogance, and a brilliant man slowly poisoning everything around him. But beneath it all is a terrific, underrated gem. Director Peter Weir gives the film a lush, humid, half-doomed grandeur, and the whole thing feels less like a conventional adventure than like an argument with the very idea of heroic masculinity. Ali wants to conquer nature, civilization, family life, and history itself through force of will and sheer intelligence. What he actually exposes is the uglier side of that compulsion. The actor completely owns the narrative and the arc of a feverish character. This is not a performance built on restraint or easy charm. It is actually built on manic conviction. The rants, the wild gestures, the thousand-yard stare, the physical agitation, all of it turns Ali into a dark mirror of the traditional Ford screen image. Watch him haul that ice machine through the jungle, sweating and ranting about America's fat, complacent future. It's really mesmerizing. The scene where he baptizes his children in the river, eyes wild with messianic certainty, chills because you see both the prophet and the madman. This isn't Ford containing his charisma. It's the actor unleashing it until the character devours everything. Family, jungle, audience sanity. Ford's performance is brilliantly supported by the rest of the ensemble. Helen Mirren's weary resilience and River Phoenix's conflicted devotion give the story its tragic heartbeat. Maurice Jarre's score hums with eerie tropical beauty, whilst John Seale's cinematography turns the jungle into a shimmering, feverish labyrinth. Paradise and madness indistinguishable. But more than anything, the Mosquito Coast gets at something crucial about Ford's choices in this period. Once he had the security of stardom, he was willing to spend it on difficult material and deeply uncomfortable characters. And from the South American jungles to the streets of Europe, the actor moved from playing a man consumed by his own certainty to one stripped of it completely. At number 4 is 1988's Frantic. Directed by Roman Polanski, the movie follows Dr. Richard Walker, an American physician who arrives in Paris for a medical conference, only for his wife to vanish from their hotel room almost as soon as they check in. What follows is an increasingly desperate journey through a city he does not understand, in a language he does not speak, surrounded by authorities who are either indifferent, obstructive, or useless. This setup sounds quite simple, but it's this exact simplicity that makes the film work. Polanski leans hard into the dislocation of Paris at night. All the back streets, metro stations, anonymous rooms, and mounting dread, whilst Ennio Morricone's score gives the whole thing a haunting, uneasy pulse. It plays like a Hitchcock thriller, complete with a MacGuffin, drained of glamour, and fed through late 1980s paranoia. No explosions, no grandstanding, just a steadily tightening sense of fear and exhaustion. Frantic shows another side of Ford. Walker's vulnerability is what makes the performance so strong. The actor dials everything down and lets the panic build slowly through fumbling, confusion, frayed patience, and a sort of quiet desperation that becomes more painful precisely because it feels so ordinary. It is arguably his finest fish-out-of-water performance because he never tries to turn Richard Walker into a hidden action hero. The actor's chemistry with Emmanuelle Seigner adds texture, her streetwise detachment sparkling against his unraveling property. Their uneasy alliance keeps the film human and gives Polanski's thriller its melancholic edge. Also, this is the first major version of a pattern Ford would later revisit. The ordinary man pulled into a search for his missing wife, and sometimes for the truth behind her disappearance. Here, it's Ford stripped of iconography, left with panic, confusion, and stubborn decency. The final shot, Walker, briefcase dangling, shirt untucked, stumbling from the metro into Parisian light, captures the actor's genius. The action hero reduced to exhausted humanity, yet unbowed. It is a rare thriller, ending where victory feels like survival. No triumphant music, just the sound of a man breathing after 48 hours of hell. And in that very same year, where Frantic showed the actor in deep panic, we also found him in a different kind of jungle and introduced to a whole new persona. That's Corporate Ford, who starred in the third movie on this list, Working Girl. Directed by Mike Nichols, the title follows Tess McGill, Melanie Griffith's smart, ambitious Staten Island secretary trying to claw her way into Manhattan's upper reaches after her boss steals her idea. Ford plays Jack Traynor, the investment banker who becomes her ally, love interest, and crucially, one of the few men in this kind of film who isn't either a total drib or an absolute shark. Nichols gives it that polished, high-gloss 1980s Manhattan surface. Shoulder pads, skyline glamour, Carly Simon's Oscar-winning anthem. But underneath it all, there's a sharp class comedy about ambition, performance, and who gets to sound authoritative in a room. Wit, pace, great supporting cast, just enough bite to keep it from floating into pure fantasy. One of the most thoroughly enjoyable studio films of that period. The actor has no issue playing second fiddle to Griffiths as she delivers her breakthrough performance, and Sigourney Weaver, who showcases a deliciously icy turn. This can make him feel like an accessory in memory, but in fact he's too good and too essential for that. Ford gives the film the exact romantic center it needs without dragging it towards star vanity. We know that Griffith's Tess is the engine, the underdog, the dreamer, pushing everything forward. So we know that Ford had to be charismatic enough, you understand the attraction. Relaxed enough, he doesn't gum up the screwball energy. And generous enough, the movie never feels like it secretly belongs to him. And he gets all of that exactly right. In the same year, he revealed to audiences his scared side. He also proved he could pivot into wit, softness, and old-school movie star charm. What makes this entry genuinely underrated is how quietly difficult Ford's job actually is. Working girl operates under enormous pressure. Careers on the line, betrayal surfacing, the whole precarious architecture of ambition about to collapse. Griffith carries that anxiety visibly, which is exactly right for her character Tess. And Ford carries none of it, which is exactly right for Traynor. He moves through the chaos with a steadiness that never reads as indifference. You always believe he cares, but you never believed he's rattled. That calm isn't passivity. It's a performance choice that gives everyone around him permission to fall apart, which is precisely what the film needs. Another actor would have played Jack Traynor as the reward at the end of Tessa's journey. Ford plays him as the eye of the storm. And if Working Girl showed how gracefully Ford could soften the image, the next title showed how compelling he could be once that image started to corrode. At number 2, Presumed Innocent. Helmed by Alan J. Pakula and adapted from Scott Turo's bestseller, the movie follows prosecutor Rusty Savage, played by Ford, assigned to investigate the brutal murder of Carolyn Polimas, his colleague and former lover. What starts as professional duty quickly becomes personal catastrophe when mounting evidence of his politics and his own marriage turned the case against him. The deeper Rusty digs, the more his carefully compartmentalized life, career, family, secrets collapses under scrutiny. The setup is pure adult thriller gold, but what makes the movie stick isn't just the mechanics. It's Pakula's atmosphere of institutional rot. The director who perfected cinema of paranoia in titles like All the President's Men and The Parallax View makes every space feel tainted. Sterile prosecutors' offices, wood-paneled courtrooms, fraying marriages, cutthroat elections. Systems don't protect here. They absorb and corrupt. Ford is excellent because he never plays Rusty as a straightforward, innocent bystander. That would collapse the whole thing. Instead, he gives a man who may be legally innocent but is absolutely guilty of vanity, weakness, self-deception, and middle-aged arrogance that believes it can contain consequences. The ensemble sharpens every edge. Brian Dennehy's cynical DA trades favors like currency. Raul Julia's defense attorney circles with predatory precision. Greta Scacchi's Carolyn lingers in flashbacks as both victim and catalyst. Bonnie Bedelia brings quiet devastation as the wife, assembling her own case. John Williams' score, all brooding piano and muted brass, gives the film its pulse of dread. Whilst it lacks the fugitive's chase, structure, or franchise iconography, Presumed Innocent represents the kind of prestige adult thriller that defined 1990s Hollywood at its most serious. But more than that, it represents the logical endpoint of everything Ford had been building since the Mosquito Coast. Ali Fox was a man destroyed by too much certainty. Rusty Savage is a man destroyed by too little honesty. Different characters, same lesson. That Ford was most compelling when stardom wasn't protecting him, when the myth had been stripped away and all that remained was a man trying to hold something together that was already coming apart. And we top this list with the role that sees Ford's career trajectory come full circle. At number 1 is The Clear and Present Danger. Directed by Philip Noyce and adapted from Tom Clancy's labyrinthine bestseller, CIA analyst Jack Ryan, played by Ford, gets yanked from his desk job into a covert war against Colombian drug cartels. What starts as sanction ops turns horrific when he discovers Washington insiders have hung his field teams out to die, treating morality as collateral damage whilst back-channel deals protect the real criminals. The author's terse betrayals and Oval Office euphemisms become muscular under Noyce. Helicopters hit hard, but suits and marble corridors do real damage. If Han Solo launched Ford in the 70s and Indiana Jones defined his career in the 80s, Jack Ryan carried the actor into the 1990s. By the time Clear and Present Danger had been released, the second time the actor played Jack Ryan after Patriot Games, Ford had settled comfortably in a new decade. No longer the hotshot rogue or swaggering adventurer, Ryan let him play older, steadier, weathered authority from judgment, not bravado. The character absorbed Ford's maturity, gravitas, and taste for moral ambiguity without sacrificing mass appeal. The actor holds intelligence, vulnerability, and moral fury in one frame. Watch him stare down the national security advisor, voice low but eyes blazing. Or piece together the betrayal whilst medevac choppers burn behind him. This is peak 1990s Ford, a star secure enough to let anger simmer rather than explode, to carry institutional weight without losing humanity. The ensemble sharps every betrayal. Willem Dafoe's John Clark leads the doomed field team with quiet professionalism, making their jungle slaughter hit harder. James Earl Jones's Admiral Greer anchors Ryan with fatherly steadiness. Even Joaquin de Almeida's Escobedo rules the cartel with silky menace. Clancy's plotting, all chess match double crosses, plus Noyce's taut pacing make every reveal lacerate. Clear and Present Danger works because of the very same reasons we find in other titles on this list. And that reason is Ford never plays Ryan as a hero waiting to happen. He plays him as an analyst who keeps discovering, to his own horror, that he's the only person in the room still treating the rules as real. That's not heroism. That's stubbornness dressed up as principle. And in Ford's hands, it's completely convincing. Because by this point in his career, you believe every line of it. And there you have it, 5 Harrison Ford films that proved the icon was only half of the story. Star Wars and Indiana Jones built the monument, but the choices seen in these 5 movies, showcasing the actor's different sides, a zealot, lost husband, the eye of the storm, a compromised prosecutor, and a moral center, tested the actor's edges. These are, after all, 5 titles that proved the thesis and that showcased that the talent was there. Luck made Harrison Ford a star, but it was range that made him a career.